Several years ago, I remember seeing photos of thousands of Central American migrants walking along a highway near Guatemala as they continued their long journey towards the United States. These images reminded me of the mass exodus after World War II that I'd read about in high school. I spent the next subsequent years searching for answers to three key questions. What was causing this mass migration? As a child of Indian immigrants in Thailand, migration is in my DNA. I've always been interested to understand why people move. My curiosity led me to an unmistakable truth. More than 8.8 million people in Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua are being affected by a confluence of drought, flood, bankruptcy, and starvation, driving them towards the north. Equally troubling is that a similar pattern is emerging from other parts of the world. The Philippines, Bangladesh, Myanmar, China, they all tell a similar narrative. The climate crisis is disproportionately affecting the global south and driving migration as many parts of the world become unviable locations for communities to live, let alone thrive. Hot places are becoming even hotter. Climate experts predict that at 2 Celsius of global warming, regions that never experienced temperatures above 32 degrees will start to see them. India alone will host more than half of the population on Earth who will face life-threatening heat stress caused by climate change. Global warming is intensifying extreme weather, including heat waves, droughts, and floods and storms. These events are becoming more frequent and devastating, causing people to flee. The compounded impacts are creating an unreliable supply of basic resources like food and water. The Institute of Economics and Peace predicts that the climate crisis could displace as many as 1.2 billion people by 2050. This creates the potential for vast disparities. Adjacent countries are experiencing similar changes but live under different governing regimes may face varying levels of climate threats. The Middle East, Northern Africa, Asia, and Central and Southern America will experience warming at a much more lethal level than cooler and more economically developed Europe. My hometown, Bangkok, which is experiencing rising sea level, is threatening its very existence. More than 10% of our citizens now live on land that's likely to be inundated by 2050. I think of the future of the home I lived in, the 3 generations that have lived and thrived, and the coming generations that may not be able to experience the abundance of this environment. And this is not unique to Thailand. Throughout the global south, the growing population and rapid urbanization will only increase the pressure and vulnerability to climate-related events. Many will have to endure rising temperatures, changing precipitation patterns, and intensifying extreme events such as storms and droughts. The crisis will push farmers off their lands to seek work in cities. The region's vulnerability is compounded by its large population in absolute terms, with many communities living in coastal areas that are most likely affected by extreme weather conditions and rising sea levels, causing a decline in living standards. While climate change threatens livelihoods and securities around the world, it is women who are bearing the worst brunt. The United Nations estimates that 80% of those displaced are women. As women dominate the workforces of sectors most vulnerable to climate, including agriculture, livestock, and fishery. To empower communities in the global south who are at the front line of this crisis to build resilience, we need to place women at the center of this transition. Those who contributed the least to causing this crisis, but are experiencing its consequences the worst. If climate change is the defining challenge of our time, are we too late to save the day? Where climate change presents a risk, it also presents an opportunity. Despite the current gap between rhetoric and reality on emissions, the International Energy Agency roadmap shows that there is a pathway to reach net zero. The pathway is narrow, and staying on it requires massive deployment of all available clean energy technologies. Major cities in the Asia-Pacific region urgently need climate investment. The Asian Development Bank estimates that $40 billion per year of financing is required to build climate resilience in the region through to 2030. Democratizing access to this capital for female entrepreneurs and the marginalized will enable cities to build climate resilience while accelerating growth and catalyzing the potential for significant innovation. We can do this by investing in and deploying climate solutions that bring our emissions down to net zero. While working on clean energy development in the Asia-Pacific region, I came across one of these entrepreneurs working at the border of Myanmar and Thailand. Her company is on a mission to provide access to clean energy for up to 1 million people living in last-mile communities disconnected from the main grid. Since then, I've come across many stories like hers, and what I'm advocating here is that we find, fund, and empower these women founders. Mitigation and adaptation efforts should systematically and effectively address gender-specific impacts of climate change in these areas. Climate experts have identified 4 areas as critical building blocks in responding to climate change: mitigation, adaptation, technology transfer, and financing. Deploying capital towards women entrepreneurs is key. Given their position at the front lines of the climate change battle, women are uniquely situated to become change agents to help find ways to mitigate the causes of global warming and to adapt to its impacts on the ground. I call it the envision model. To accelerate this model, we need to foster a thriving climate innovation ecosystem to deploy technologies at scale, create new markets, and build climate resilience in cities. Climate tech is going to be one of the biggest wealth creation opportunities. Venture capital investment in the climate tech space is growing 5 times faster than overall VC, with $60 billion increase in funding over the last several years. Funding the next generation of climate tech unicorns in the global south will help to scale the most effective technologies and build resilience. However, the current model of venture financing is not equitable. A minor fraction of this capital was invested in tech companies founded by women, less than 3% of total capital on average. Despite this disparity, startups founded and co-founded by women actually perform significantly well over time, generating 10% more in cumulative revenue over a 5-year period. On the investment front, women make up only 12% of the decision makers in VCs. Women are leading the way behind the scenes, yet are so rarely at the decision-making table when it comes to how and whom funding is deployed to. What would a vision of the future where the marginalized are central in driving solutions to climate resiliency look like? We have the agency to solve this crisis, and we must act now. Addressing the gender financing gap will require going beyond the status quo. This will require diversifying the investor base through building effective co-investor partnership with local partners who have an acute understanding of the geographic, cultural, and economic variables in these markets. We'll need to mobilize programmatic, catalytic capital, donors, corporates, investors, venture funds, universities, and government agencies. We need to invest in solutions across renewable energy technologies, energy efficiency in the built environment, clean transport, and regenerative agriculture. In doing so, we can optimize cities through the use of data and technology to create efficiencies, improve sustainability, and enhance quality of life for people living and working in these cities. Climate change affects every part of the planet. It's a global problem that requires local solutions. Many new climate innovations emerge from local enterprises that know market conditions best. We need to fund local solutions that will ultimately strengthen its communities. To ensure successful delivery of this model, we'll need to establish regulatory and policy frameworks that promote competition and innovation through building regional networks to open up new markets and help startups escape the valley of debt. One approach is to look at how we produce, consume, and eliminate food wastage. By 2050, we'll need to produce 70% more food to feed an estimated 9 billion people. Currently, a third of all food that is grown is wasted. Farmers are severely being impacted by climate-related threats such as droughts. Enabling the agricultural sector to be more efficient and environmentally friendly can help farmers adapt to the devastating impacts on their livelihoods. In India, a startup is leasing advanced technology such as laser leveling machines and equipment to farmers on a pay-per-use basis. This ensures accessibility and affordability. This solution can reduce water use by almost 30% and increase crop productivity by up to 20%. Electrification can accelerate the pathway to net zero. Local solutions are being deployed to decarbonize transportation and energy. In India, a female founder is on a mission to improve access to fast charging for electric vehicles, leveraging on the Internet of Things to control these systems to reduce charge time and extend range of travel. Solutions like this can unlock the adoption of electric vehicles and reduce transport emissions. Hop over to Bangladesh, and we see an innovative model to create a peer-to-peer trading network of power produced from solar rooftops. A micro-network where neighbors can trade electricity free of any contract with the electric utility. Technological innovation is central to low-emission and climate-resilient development throughout the world. If cities take this proactive envision approach and coordinate the efforts of many stakeholders in the climate space and support the adaptation of technologies to local conditions, we can address some of the most significant barriers that prevent climate innovation from reaching the people who need it the most. The empowerment of women and girls and their protection from the consequences of climate change must lie at the heart of the just transition to a zero-carbon future. The world has an important choice to make. We cannot have progress for all if a significant part of the population is not included in the climate justice conversation. Placing equity and justice at the center of our efforts must be key to a transition to a cleaner future. We must find, fund, and empower women to become catalysts of far-reaching climate action. Not only is this essential for economies and communities to thrive, but this is the equitable solution in our race to zero.